Alright, Vloggerdome video, initial video on the subject of economics. So I would like this to be a 5-minute video, but there's probably no chance. So I'll try to keep it brief and concise, but, you know, it'll be what it is. I'll try to convert these notes, which will be below, into questions, and welcome argument on these premises, essentially, which I'll go over. So anyway, first, work can have two qualities, productive or wasted. That means, yeah, quite obviously. You know, you can be building infrastructure, you can be paving a road, you can be doing all kinds of good work, and then there's bureaucracy jobs, paper shuffling. Even a ton of work is involved in doing stuff that shouldn't even be necessary in civilization. You know, police officers, all this other stuff. They're productive in the current context. They just mean absolutely. It'd be really good if we didn't have to do all this. Let's incarcerate people and punish people and judge people, and you know, that whole infrastructure is just a big fat waste, and it's just created because some people won't play by the rules. You know, I mean, I could be guilty of that too. Anyway, but yeah, more importantly, there's lots of work where people have jobs, like they're calling other people on the phone just trying to sell them stuff they don't need, and that they're just trying to trick them into buying. All kinds of fraud out there, people doing jobs where they're just basically stealing people's money. So yeah, that's very unproductive work, and it's wasted work, but sometimes it's just outright destructive. Sorry, yeah, I went this longer than it should have been. Productive work usually creates durable value. So yeah, refrigerators or, you know, some sort of thing, TVs, whatever, stuff you can use for a while. Wasted work creates little or no social value and is of minimal durability. Yeah, like weddings, parties, restaurants, all this kind of labor-intensive, very little durable value out of the experience. Some work can also be a $1 million birthday party. Lots of wasted work there. People go to work, do all this stuff just to make one jackass happy, and a few other people are drunk and hungover. You know, really stupid. Some work can also be socially destructive or worse than waste. So yeah, the crooks and the thieves. The gimmicks, the lawyers, the small print, you know, just a ton of work. I mean, you could find that like more than half the people that have a job are probably doing a job that has little social value, and you know, it pays their bills. But beyond that, the work they're doing is probably socially corrosive. Wealth does not create jobs. Yeah, this is a big one. Yeah, the rich do not create jobs. It just converts resources into surplus. So when you acquire wealth or ownership, you basically take resources, possession of, a certificate of ownership of resources, and you don't let that certificate back out into the economy unless it's going to pay you interest, some sort of or outright profit. So it turns resources into rentables that we have to pay somebody. We have to pay the owner just for owning. Totally unproductive. Demand creates jobs. Demand, not owners. So if all the owners drop dead tomorrow, even if all the factories burned down tomorrow, they'd all be rebuilt. Most of them, and people would go back to doing work again because demand would create the incentive for that. Jobs by incentivizing the provision of supply. Supply and demand. It's not about rich people. You don't need rich people to have supply and demand. They don't need to be the source of our supply. I'll get to that later. The basic function of industry needs no owner to maximize efficiency. The owners play no role. They're just profit takers. They're just leeches on industry. To maximize efficiency, to be maximized, efficiency must incorporate qualitative components. So efficiency isn't just about getting the most labor out of the workers as possible. Then slavery would be considered a great industry. Obviously, the workers are important. The environment's important. There's lots of other stuff that has to be considered in defining what efficient business function is. Long-term impact, environmental costs, quality of life costs, fair worker compensation, infrastructure costs, etc. You know, and if you're in a business that requires it, all this money that's spent marketing, seducing, you know, paying people hundreds of $1,000s to design your Coke can, so it triggers some sort of psychiatric response in people. Just utter nonsense, wasted labor. Inheritance. Plainly unearned distribution of value produced by work. So all the value, I'm going to argue, is produced by workers, and they should get the substance of the reward. Instead, the substance of the reward ends up going to people who never worked a day in their life. They get to possess this ownership, collect this interest out of the money, the profit created by workers, and it's just patently unfair. I can go into all kinds of examples. A real quick analogy: if we had little three-legged races at the park, and you took your little kid there, and when you got there, you found out that we're going to just automatically, some people get to go halfway up the track, and some people get to go three-quarters of the way up the track, and some people are just 1 inch from the finish line. You wouldn't bother tying the rope around your kid's foot. You wouldn't bother getting yourself in the sack. You wouldn't bother doing any of it. You should say, this is a stupid race. There's no chance of winning, so what's the point in it? If we did the unfairness of inheritance and anything else in our lives, we'd see the obscenity of it. If professional baseball players, if their sons automatically got to be professional baseball players without having to meet any standards of skill, you'd say, why watch baseball anymore? It's silly. It'd be a girl sport, right? Yeah, it'd be silly. You might watch it just because it's so silly, but the point is you wouldn't have any integrity as a sport anymore. It would just have integrity as a mockery of a sport, and that's what inheritance creates. Nepotism. It's a mockery to fairness. It's a non-starter if you're going to have anything called a fair game, anything with any kind of integrity. It just breaks it, just blows it to pieces. Creates permanent resource inflation, as the resources converted into surplus will have to be rented at interest into public utilities. This is a key thing to understand. The wealthy don't create money. They don't create wealth. They take resources. They take possession of them as owners. And once they put their label on it, the only way it can be used is you have to rent it from them at profit. So they will glean profit out of whatever utility you put. If it was a plow, for example, and you had to rent it from the owner is going to get not only the value of the item to replace it in case it gets broken, but he's going to get a profit out of the deal. And so all the work you do, the value of whatever potatoes you grow, some percentage of them will be essentially destroyed, in the sense that you'll gain no value out of them, because this person will glean them as part of its surplus and put them in his vault. Alright, keeps resources off the public market, which inflates prices. Just the obvious. All the houses, all the industry, none of these things go back on the market for sale. That means the prices are hugely inflated. The stock market prices for ownership of shares, it's 3 cents on the dollar, kind of preposterous inflation of real value. Because there's so much ownership dollars out there trying to possess, claiming ownership to commodities. Obviously, when that crashes, they're going to lose big time because there's no bottom. Provides no socially useful incentives. Obviously, no incentive to do productive work. So as soon as you give somebody a free ride, you send them to Harvard. There's just no point in having a kid, giving them a great education, paying for a Harvard education, and then have them wasted on a golf course. It just breaks the system in so many ways. Not only does it cheat the productive worker by stealing his salary to pay this loafer, on top of that, and cost us all more. We have to pay more for our houses and more for any resource in the economy we have to pay more for, because they keep bidding us out of our ownership. On top of that, it creates this their capacity to do work is lost, and so they don't even contribute to the economy. They're just the worst kind of welfare possible. Millionaire welfare is insane, and creates opportunity for squander. This is the biggest part of it. This resource possession is rewarded by the tax code. It's really easy to hold on to your wealth and even to make more money on money. Money can make you richer. Owning surplus, renting the rest of the world resources can be very profitable, and that gleaning of income in such mass creates huge opportunity for it just to be squandered. And so instead of the money being invested in productive things in the economy, it's invested in silly things like birthday parties, $1 million birthday parties, and manicured bushes, and well-dressed goldfish, It's just nonsense all the way down. Makes ownership perpetual, and in turn makes ownership more profitable than productive work. Again, the most important thing to do in an economy is incentivize productive work, not incentivizing loafership of ownership. Totally backward economic incentives. You have a real incentive to gain hold of resources, possess ownership, because then you will not have to be productive any longer, and you will glean a good salary for not being productive. So ownership is a lot more profitable than doing productive work, risking your life, or burning the midnight oil in a laboratory to find a cure for cancer. That should be incentivized, and this sitting around planning your birthday party should be de-incentivized. The invisible hand, this is a good quote, I think. The invisible hand is nothing but a thief if it is filling something other than a working person's pocket. So yeah, I'll put that in my quotables. Okay, the invisible hand is nothing but a thief if it is filling something other than a working person's pocket. The invisible hand, referring to Adam Smith's invisible hand of the free market. The free market is meaningless if you're going to allow people to have legacy wealth. You break all the productive incentives are destroyed. It's a horse race where the fix is in. Just stupid. Productive workers pay everyone else's salary. Pay, it should be pay. Okay, so productive workers pay everyone else's salary. So that's basically just a recognition of the fact that there is no free lunch. So when somebody's working and they're not doing something productive and they're taking a paycheck, the money had to come from somewhere. And originally the wealth, the value, came from a worker, a productive worker. So the rich man steals the value of the productive worker, and then he pays an idiot to do a stupid job, like, wiping his ass. And so that wasted work is now, that ass wiping, is now paid for out of the productive worker's value that he created. Just intrinsically nonsensical. Alright, so this is the real, getting to the gist of it. The public option. This should be what we should have a choice of, and this could fix the system. We get rid of inheritance, at least the preposterous inheritance, and do this, and we'll have a real economy, a real game to play. Publicly seeded, not-for-profit industry. So the government should finance the construction, the providing, the building of competitive businesses in all the standard industries, especially the easy ones like insurance and banking and that kind of stuff. And these businesses have no owner, not even the workers, because as soon as you make a worker an owner, as soon as you give him a stock in the company, he all of a sudden starts thinking like an owner, and starts thinking that maybe small print is a good idea because, I'll get 2 more weeks vacation if we can cheat some people out of their money. Workers should want to do their job well. They should never have an incentive to be a slimy owner, or to think like a slimy, selfish owner. A coalition of consumers and workers should define management. So the CEO should be elected by a percentage vote of people buying the product and people who make the product. Something like that. So essentially the consumers are always usually workers. So, but just you have to have a balance between these two interests we have. We have an interest to be paid very well for working very little, as self-interest, but we also as consumers have an interest to get other people to work a little harder for a little less. And those two interests have to be balanced. So you just find a way to balance those two interests in deciding who manages industries, these publicly owned, not-for-profit industries. Caps on maximum and minimum compensation. So you just make the minimum salary, whatever, $35,000 for 8 hours work a day for whatever, 40 weeks, and the maximum salary of say $250,000 or $300,000 for the CEO. Let the CEO define the management, and the management define the employees, and everybody does their job, and if they don't do the job, they get fired. And put the management under the scrutiny of some electoral process maybe have one executive branch, presidential appointee kind of person or elected person who manages the companies and suggests people for getting voted out of their job. Capitalism is greed economics. Self-interest is seldom the social interest. I mean, this should just go without saying that putting capital, the investment capital, the money that will decide what we will have as buyables, consumables, and at what price we'll pay for those consumables, what kind of perversions the market will resort to. When you put that in the hands of self-interested people, you get profiteering. You don't get productivity. And societies should do better to create civilization through economics, not to destroy civilization through economics. So I think that about covers it. So I'll try to convert that into questions sometime in the near future, but if you disagree with some elements, please provide a video, a link or something, and I will deal with your critique. Thank you.